Hello. In this video, I'll be walking you through our new program assessment report form. As was discussed during in-service of January 2025, we've talked about how while we definitely know that faculty are consistently working to document student learning in their courses and work to make sure that these courses are consistently improving, we as an institution kind of struggle on documenting what that looks like outside of the classes themselves, right? Reporting on it, closing the loop, all of that stuff that we've talked about in things like assessment boot camp and in conversations related to course level learning and assessment. So to kind of make sure we're doing something similar here, we have constructed, and I say we as in the assessment committee, have constructed this program assessment report form. So the initial version of this report form was discussed during that January 2025 in-service, and then based on feedback we received either during that session or in the feedback form that was released shortly after that session, we revised it, and then we brought it to the assessment committee, the co-chairs, Sarah and I, and based on conversations during the committee meetings, we continued to revise it, and that has led us to this version of the form. Some parts of this are going to be similar to what you saw during in-service, others may be a little different. I want you to keep in mind, too, that this is a fluid form, in that once people start using it, I'm sure there are other things that will need tweaked a little bit, and that's fine. When we do the official rollout, in that when you start using it at the end of the semester, we will have another feedback form attached to it as well. So right after you've completed it for the first time, you will have another opportunity to give feedback and talk about what you think could be better, what worked, what didn't, everything like that. So your opinion very much still matters. And if after watching this video even you think, hey, Morgan, I want to change X, Y, and Z, or can we talk about, X, Y, and Z, more than happy to do that 100%. Just let me know. So let's get into the faculty information section. This is pretty similar to what you've seen in the course level assessment form. I'll make it a little bigger so you can see. So we've got faculty names and roles. So if you're only, let's say you're a program of one, it would just be your name and what your role is. But let's say that you've got like 3 or 4 folks that are writing this report together, then we would list all of them. So there's a little note here that reads, if one person is composing the report from multiple faculty members in the same program, please list all faculty members associated with this data. This should also include if someone is a program coordinator, instructor, etc. So we would have, for example, if my name was, I don't know, let's say that I am the program coordinator, I would include that in parentheses. And then let's say that I also have, like, I don't know, I'm blanking on names here that I'm making up. John Reynolds, instructor, etc. Right? So we would just have that information about who is who, who's putting together what, etc. Next is your program. Pretty straightforward. And then the academic year. So during which academic year was this data gathered? This is going to help us keep everything straight on our end. When it comes to course level assessment, we've done a pretty good job of cataloging all of our data. There are comprehensive reports that are out for each individual division, stuff like that. This helps with that. So I'll go ahead and just put our standard nonsense into our individual sections so that we can get to the next one. The next section is outcomes. So in this section, you will include information about your program's goals / outcomes, beginning with which program goals or outcomes were assessed during this academic year. And very similar to course level assessment, we're going again with please list at least 2 program outcomes. So if you are like, oh my God, I have 87, you don't have to do all of them at once. Don't worry about it. We're just focusing on at least 2 this time around. These outcomes should correlate specifically to student learning and performance, not retention, graduation or employment rates, etc., that are measured outside of the classroom. It is entirely likely that you need that information, especially for like a third-party accreditor. But for student learning in particular, like we talked about during in-service, we want to make sure that we are looking at student learning and performance, not retention, graduation, employment, etc. Those are indirect, but those also can fluctuate depending on what the job market looks like, what a given, economic system looks like at that moment, etc. So we really just want to make sure we're looking at what's going on in the classroom. And then please upload your updated program alignment map. So initially, to give you kind of a background of what this used to look like in case it's been a while since you saw the original, there used to be a question about which outcomes you weren't assessing at this point so that you had a frame of reference for what would be coming next. Instead of doing that, we're just going to have folks upload their program alignment map. That way we can see, all right, here's what they're doing. Here's the stuff that's not being assessed yet. So we'll go ahead and add in our gibberish, and we'll upload a file, any file. You can see that I was putting in videos earlier. All right, so we've got our file here. Now we can hit next. Our assessment measure. So in which course or courses was this measure utilized? When applicable, make sure to use data derived from a capstone course specifically. We again talked about this during in-service. One of the core, Linda Susky, one of the assessment gurus, kind of, if we're thinking about people who are really, really good at what they do in terms of writing about, documenting, and then instructing people on how to do assessment effectively and efficiently, talks about how capstone courses are really the moment to make sure students are doing what they're doing, especially in a program setting. So in thinking about that in particular, that is the course that you want to focus on. However, there were several faculty members that noted that they often measure progress across several courses. That's fine. You can note that here too. So if you are thinking, I have, it's structured, I scaffold, then you should, right? All of us on this campus should be scaffolding learning. So if that is something that you do, and that's how you measure this multi-step thing over the course of several courses, you can note that in number 6. And then number 7, briefly describe the instruction students received before and while completing the measure. So the example here kind of begins with students were given 5 weeks to complete this assignment. During this time, we covered blank. Let's say that, hypothetically, again, you are using multiple courses. So this would be a good opportunity to expound upon what happened in those multiple courses. What instruction did they get in step 1, and then step 2, and then step 3? This does not need to be like 6 paragraphs in length. It can be brief, but one thing that we found was kind of missing in the course level assessment feedback was that, or not feedback, but the reports, was that we didn't really get a lot of information about the instruction that had been happening before we started getting information about how they intended to change that instruction. So what instruction were students already getting? What did they get before the measure and while completing it? That can also help tell more of your story when it comes to student learning. What did the learning environment look like? That's where you can start establishing a lot of that context. Number 8, briefly describe the measure used to assess student achievement of the program's goals and outcomes. So you can see we kind of move forward in individual steps before we finally get to the assignment. So in which course or courses is this happening? What instruction did they get? And then finally, what is the actual assignment? And please make sure you are selecting a measure that assesses 2 or more outcomes. One thing that we noted in course level assessment feedback was that there were cases where folks would, and this is understandable given that we've just started assessing multiple outcomes, but there were cases in which folks were pulling in like 3 or 4 different assignments. And we really don't want to do that because the goal is that, especially in a capstone course, right, they are utilizing their skills, all of these skills, to be able to demonstrate them together. There is a cohesive picture looking at maybe not every single outcome, but multiple outcomes together, right? They're able to do all of those things. So we want to make sure that instead of looking at multiple assignments, we are pulling from one single assignment that assesses at least 2 outcomes. Again, if you've got like 7, 8, and you can't get them all in one assignment, that's okay, but at least 2 at this point is what we're looking for. And then, if available, upload a copy of the measures assignment sheet. So let's go ahead and add in our nonsense here so we can continue through our form. There we go. All right, which brings us to assessment data. At this point, you've probably noticed that each individual section of this form mirrors course level assessment, so not really anything you're unfamiliar with. And this question is taken directly from that form as well. What was the student success benchmark for this assessment measure? So even if you don't have a rubric, and a lot of people don't, which is fine, if you're doing an exam or something like that, you should still have some way in which you quantify success. What does success look like for these program outcomes? So in this case, it might be at least 80% of students will receive at least an 85 on X thing, right? X assignment that measures whether or not we're meeting these outcomes. So what is the success benchmark for this specific measure? Number 11, consider student performance on the measure. If possible, use Blackboard's rubric evaluation report to gather data on the measure. Based on this information, with which elements of the measure did students struggle? With which elements did they excel? So this is your opportunity to dig into your data. You do want to look beyond letter grades. We've talked about how letter grades make a really good foundation, for providing data, but if you've got like 40% of students getting a B is fine, but like why are they getting that B? What are they struggling with, and is it something you're noticing is consistent across, 10, 15 students? If we have that data, then you can have a super informed improvement plan, but we need to have it first. So make sure to consider students at all performance levels, including those that failed the measure. This can also include context too, like students not following directions, not turning anything in, etc. Just because, let's say that you kind of have a dud of a semester, that does not mean that you yourself have to have done something wrong, right? Providing context here is super important. And then number 12, based on your previous answer concerning student struggles and successes, how well did they meet the benchmark? So we have our benchmark, we have our context here, right? Here's how they performed, here are some struggles, here are some successes. Based on that, did they meet the benchmark? Did they not meet the benchmark? How did they or did they not meet that benchmark? You do want to be specific. So these guiding questions can really help you flesh out each individual portion of your data, figuring out what happened and what didn't. And then after that, we're going to come to another section that is pretty familiar, and that is your improvement and or maintenance plan. Remember that an improvement plan is, all right, our loop is not closed. We want to make sure that we are working towards closing it though, so we're going to make some changes based upon our data. If that 40% of people did get a B, figure out why they got a B, and then in our improvement plan, talk about how we intend to address that content area. Whereas a maintenance plan would be for, you did meet your success benchmark. Your loop is closed, you're good, but we still want to make sure that we are continuing to have that level of student success. So what are you going to do to continue maintaining that level of student success? So based on your previous answers, have you closed this loop? To close a loop in the sense of assessment means to have documented student improvement in relation to a specific set of outcomes. Now, this is the first time we're using this form, and especially not just in preparation for, an accreditation visit, but just to make sure that we've got cataloged examples of, successful assessment stories, successful, stories in terms of our programs and student learning. We want to make sure that we can have cohesive stories. Now, because it's the first time we're doing it, the loop has only just opened. So no one is closing a loop yet. So at the time of putting this video out, right, and I'm recording this in February of 2025, is your loop closed? No, because this is new, right? If you come back and assess it again, and heck yeah, they met the benchmark, they're doing what they need to do, loop is closed, we can be on a maintenance plan. That is fine. But we are at the very beginning of this story, so our answer is going to be no. In this section, you're going to describe your improvement or your maintenance plan. So again, very similar to course level assessment, and you will connect any proposed changes to your data. If that 40% didn't do so hot, and they got a B, why did they get a B? If you had 30% that got a C or a D, why did they get a C or a D? Did you notice that they missed questions that were also missed by folks who got a B? That is a content area that needs addressed. How do you intend to address it? That's what you're going to fill out in this number 14 section. And then these next two are pretty easy. When will these changes be implemented? Likely going to be the next time you teach those outcomes, right? Which, our loop is open, we're going to look at these outcomes again, right? So that's going to be the next time this course is taught. And then finally, are additional resources necessary to facilitate these changes? If you say yes, you are going to get a question that asks you to expound upon what you need to facilitate those changes, whether that is funding, specific materials, more time, etc. If you say no, that is going to be where the form ends. So when it comes to filling this out, right, again, if there are things that you notice maybe aren't working all that well, if there are things that you think need to be changed, we will have a feedback form available when we send this out for completion, right? We're sending it out earlier in the semester just to make sure everyone's seen it and that they know what's coming, but you will have another opportunity to provide feedback, and I really encourage you to do so. And if you have any questions about assessment before then, by all means, shoot me an email. My email is byrne@mctc.edu. You can also contact Sarah Dick. We would be more than happy to go over this with you. Assessment is like one gigantic group project. It does kind of take a village in that sense, and we want to make sure that it is something that is accessible to everybody. So if you've got questions, comments, concerns, by all means, shoot me an email, come by my office, I'm in 317, and let me know. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have a good day.